Happy Thursday afternoon. I'm Jim with the Maryland Distillers Guild. Thank you for tuning in. If you are tuning in live, that's great. We'd love to hear from you. So feel free to add any comments or questions that you have right there in the chat, either on Facebook or YouTube. We would welcome your input, welcome any questions you have, and add them to our conversation today. If you are tuning in later, feel free to throw comments or questions in, and we'll always circle back, answer any questions you might have, or at least drop a note to let you know that we heard from you. So thank you very much for being a part of our talk today. Sorry, it's been a couple of weeks. The weird weather and winter snaps of snow kept rescheduling this particular engagement, but I'm looking very, very much forward to today's talk. We'll be joined by Michael Rasmussen at Painted Stave Distillery in Smyrna, Delaware. So we're actually the Maryland Distillers Guild, but we have a couple of members who come to us from outside the state. We'll hear all about that and why they are members of our guild. But before we get started, just want to remind everybody that Maryland's distilleries are open for business, whether you're buying Maryland-made spirits or Delaware-made spirits at your local liquor store or through your favorite distillery's tasting room, whether that's through curbside pickup, any kind of carry-out, delivery, or shipping in the state of Maryland or Delaware, let us know. We're going to find out what they're allowed to do in Delaware. It sounds like things are a little bit different there. So feel free to ask your questions, shoot us your comments, and I'm looking forward to this chat. Mike, how are you this afternoon?
I'm good. I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm well. Yeah, you pop up real quick in these things.
Yeah.
So I can't give you
I
can't give you like a behind the scenes or anything. Like, hey,
like
you're up.
Flicker. Yeah.
Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time this afternoon to chat.
Oh yeah, happy to. Finally made it so we didn't have anything fall out of the sky on us on a Wednesday or on a Thursday and make it possible. So
yeah, it's great. For those tuning in, Mike and I both have children, and the stay-home days because of snow has been problematic. So it's nice to have sun in the background and seemingly higher temperatures.
Yeah, I'll take it, even if it's not what I really want. I'm in there for it.
So I realized that we're coming in on doing this for almost a year. I believe that St. Patrick's Day was 1 year of these. Last year we started these Thirsty Thursday chats. They've gone well. It's been a fun year. We're getting a new way of learning about all of our members' businesses, learning about the great spirits that are made here in the region. We're learning about new innovations and the diversity behind all these ideas and creativity that you as distillery operators and distillers have. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be on and willing to share your story.
Yeah, happy to.
So let's get right off the bat. Tell us about Painted Stave Distilling. Tell us about kind of what's going on in your world and how you tie in as a Delaware distiller to the Maryland Distillers Guild.
Sure. Okay. So first off, Painted Stave Distilling. We got our start back in the fall of 2013 is when we opened. My business partner, Ron Gomes, and I met in the summer of 2011. So it took us about 2 years. We had both been kicking the tires on the idea of a distillery, but about 2 years worth of planning and then build out work. We finally opened in the fall of 2013. So 7 years and a couple of months. We are located in downtown Smyrna, Delaware. Smyrna is a small town. It's about 250 years ago. It was settled, was originally a farming community. 20 years ago, it was a town of about 4,000 people. Now we're a town of 12,000 with about including the communities around us, probably around 30,000 people. So it's a growing area in our town or in our state, but we're located about midway between Newark and Dover. If anybody is ever riding up and down Route 1 in Delaware, we've got 2 exits. So that makes us extra cool. We have 2 Wawas also, just in case you need to know that. But so when we were looking for places to locate, we came to Smyrna originally looking at an industrial park spot, but the town actually got word that we were sniffing around, and there was an old movie theater that was downtown, had been sitting abandoned for about 7 years at that time. Before being a movie theater, or before it being abandoned, it had been a plumbing supply store. So it hadn't been a movie theater since like the mid 80s, really. But they thought, smartly on their end, I think, wow, wouldn't it be cool if we could attract this sort of a business to our downtown? So we had a bit of a unique start in that, a lot of distilleries are out there looking for places, struggling to find it. And we literally had a town recruiting us to try and locate in their downtown. We got a great, cool building. It's an old brick building. It was built in 1948. It houses our tasting room where I'm standing behind our bar right now. We've got an art gallery, event space, which we obviously haven't used in a year. And then we have our entire production facility where the seating and everything was. The still sits right where the screen would have been when it was a theater. So pretty cool layout. The building also, when we purchased it, it had multiple empty lots right around it. So over the course of the last few years, we've added on an additional 5,000 square foot barrel house in the back. And we've built out a what we call a cocktail garden, sort of an outdoor seating area that's got lots of grass and fire pits and awnings and stuff like that, to build out kind of a distillery campus. Yeah, so 2013, the fall, opened the doors. Like a lot of small distilleries, we opened with gin and vodka, with goals of laying down whiskey. We didn't start off by sourcing any whiskey or doing anything like that. We wanted to be entirely in-house for our production. So we opened our doors with gin and vodka that first fall, and then started laying down barrels as much as we could, as well as rolling out some different products, some small batch things, test batches, some stuff that I'll talk about as we kind of mention a little bit more about products down the road. And now, 7.5 years in almost, we distribute our products throughout Delaware and Maryland. We use LibDib to get our products out to California and to New York. We have a little bit of distribution in Chicago area. And then we are just now rolling out 2 of our products already, and 2 more to come with Total Wine Spirit Direct program. That's then going to put the whiskeys, starting with our bottle and bond whiskeys. And those are going to head out to 5 more states, 22 stores in 5 states. So we're starting to branch out a little bit further than the Delaware, Maryland, sort of the home market for distribution at this point, which is all happy, good stuff. So, yeah.
That's all very encouraging. And I would say with 2 Wawas, 2 exits, and a distillery like Painted Stave, anybody coming to town has got a hell of a weekend in front of them.
That's right. It's a good reason to get off the highway. That's how we look at it.
So tell me a little bit about how you chose that distribution footprint. It seems a little it seems very strategic, but also a little scattershot with how the geography lays out.
So for us, we always considered Delaware and Maryland was our kind of our home market, right? We're on the Delmarva Peninsula. And so our goal was to be in Delaware and Maryland. We didn't start the business with the idea of being a national brand sort of thing. We always figured we would be a smaller sort of maybe regional distillery, destination distillery type of operation. So Delaware obviously made sense. We worked with Breakthrough Beverage in both Delaware and Maryland. We wanted to have somebody as a distribution partner that had pretty broad reach in those markets. We brought on Delaware first, and then about a year, 7-8 months after that, we launched into Maryland. On the average weekend when we were doing tours and things like that, we have a lot of people from the Annapolis, the Eastern Shore, Baltimore, and then the northern counties of Maryland that come here. A lot of folks who are coming to Delaware for other reasons, Dover Downs or things like that. We end up being a nice location, and so we see a lot of traffic from that area. It made sense to make sure that those folks could find our products when they went back home in liquor stores and bars in Maryland. So that was the fundamental thinking when we first got our distribution going. Since then, it's been a little bit opportunistic. Both Ron and myself grew up in California. We still have family and friends and folks out there. So finding a way to get our products out to California was a big goal for us. It's not a lot of distribution, but it is fun to be able to have folks that go out and find a liquor store in the San Francisco Bay Area or something and manage to find your product on the shelf. That's kind of cool. And New York is kind of the same thing. And obviously, it's the biggest market. So being able to be on the shelf in some of those whiskey bars or liquor stores in or in New York is just a nice to have. Though, I mean, that's a tiny percentage of our market. Most of our sales are the folks who walk through the door here at the distillery, or those main product distributions here in Delaware and Maryland.
I'm always intrigued by the personal ties to how distribution networks work. In my previous life in the beer world, it was always wonderful to get a text from somebody a few states away who's like looking at your beer on a shelf somewhere, or, bought it and throw it in their refrigerator.
Yeah, somebody sent us a picture of our bottle from California, but it was like $80 on the shelf, and we're like, man, like that's a markup right there.
Well, if it's selling well. Prestige product, right?
Selling for $80, good for them, right? I'm all for it. So,
and the New York scene makes a lot of sense, especially with craft spirits. I mean, the idea that you're going to be featured in, a cocktail bar or something like that that's known for bringing in unique and diverse offerings is a great place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So all of that kind of makes sense. And then the opportunity with Total Wine to expand our market like that. We had spoken with them in the past about rolling out products through the Spirits Direct program. It was, it wasn't a good fit about 4 or 5 years ago, the first time we had a conversation with them. But a follow-up conversation in 2020, in the summer of 2020, was, we've got enough of the product, the aged product that they were looking for, that we could start to meet some of those demand. And so it felt like a good fit and a good time. And those are markets where we weren't looking to put boots on the ground sort of sales distribution type of thing. So it made a little bit more sense to try and move into a few new markets with a partner like Total Wine, where ultimately they're going to help lead that sales charge in their stores, which is nice because it lowers those sales costs. Small distillery, right? Travel costs could eat up an entire PO, or the profit on a PO, if we had to, spend 2 weeks someplace trying to do sales.
So do you see that taking you further west, or are you thinking that most of that impact's going to be here in the Mid-Atlantic region?
Mostly East Coast. So Massachusetts, New Jersey, South Carolina, Georgia, and then Minnesota are the states that we're starting off in. But we'd certainly like to see, some of those either markets like Florida or some of the other larger markets out west, if possible. But it's good. We're going to find out. They're starting with our bottled and bond bourbon and our bottled and bond rye, and then they're going to be adding on 2 of our gins in the next. Those are going to be launching in June.
Very good.
Same markets.
Well, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah. It's nice.
Seems like you got a practice run the last couple of weeks for that weather in Minnesota. So if you ever have to go up and support them in the market, you'll be all set.
Going there in the summertime, I'm pretty sure. The last thing I need to do is be in Minnesota in the middle of the winter.
I hear it's an interesting experience.
Yeah.
They have all the the above ground tunnels between the buildings and stuff, right? So you can just walk from one building to another.
Growing up and going to college in upstate New York, out in the Rochester area, Buffalo area.
You got your fill.
It's nothing like having to just blindly walk holding onto a rope to get to class because the snow is blowing and it's 30 degrees below zero type of thing. So I've had enough.
Abby, our events director, comes from Buffalo, and she said the same thing this winter. She's like, I moved away from Buffalo for a reason. Let's get rid of this snow and let's just turn it to spring. Let's make that happen.
Yeah, totally.
Well, very cool. Your location sounds awesome. I cannot wait to come out there and check out what you have going on. I like how you describe it as a campus. It seems like you're really making an impact as part of the community and a destination within the community rather than just a place in an industrial park.
Yeah.
So I think you're right.
It's a nice opportunity. We never intended our business to be part of an economic or a downtown revitalization type of effort. But it certainly fit well with it. And since I've moved my family here, I'm one of the town council members now. So I'm one of our elected officials. I'm totally bought in. I'm all about it. But it's been a nice thing. The flexibility that having our own space and this much space is provided has been really, really nice. This last summer, we built our own food truck. We had struggled, as a lot of distilleries do, with trying to get food trucks to show up. Some were great, some just canceled every time or were awful about it. So we opened our own taco truck this fall. but we had a spot to do that, and we could accommodate those type of things. So we've slowly made the best and continue to add on to create as much of, or meet as many of our needs as possible, and be able to do that in a downtown spot. There are very few places, I think, that could do something like this, because the storage needs, especially for like a brewery, but even for a distillery, if you want to have an aging program and be able to put away more than, a couple hundred barrels, where are you going to find an extra 5,000 square foot laying around in a small downtown that you can drive a forklift into? So
very good points.
Yeah. So.
Very good points. I'm always fascinated by how much of an impact this industry, whether it's beer, wine, spirits, this craft beverage industry is making such an impact on places that are kind of forgotten or abandoned, or kind of left to waste, in places where those buildings and those properties should be totally reused and revitalized in some way. Yeah. And it has a really widespread impact on the community. So I think that's very cool.
Yeah, and since we opened here, we've had a brew pub open here in town. We've had a brewery open here in town. And my hope is obviously to see more things like that. It's a really cool small town. It's a neat place. There's a lot for people to like about it. And so we're trying to find as many ways as we can contribute to that as possible. And what's interesting, everybody's struggled with COVID. It's been a game changer for a lot of folks. One of the things that we've seen is we used to look at our market as sort of the circle of where everybody came to. And it was a pretty big circle, right? I mean, if you take in everybody from the tours and everything, we were casting southern New Jersey, southern Pennsylvania, Maryland, northern Virginia. A lot of our market was coming from, an hour and a half away on a regular basis. We've seen that market shrink down and get a lot tighter. And we're a lot tighter to our community. Now we're 15, 20 miles away. But the people who are here in our community, they really appreciate what we're doing. We're not able to offer the tours and the tastings like we did, but we are able to go a lot deeper with that community. So it's been sort of a neat thing. They've supported us. We've been there to try and be as innovative and fun as possible to give them something to do during lockdown and when everyone's suffering at home with their kids. So the community has come together even more in the last year, I think, and it's been really nice. It's been nice to see. So.
I didn't get lost or hung up. I was in another tab. I'm sorry.
You disappeared.
I'm typing away. I think that the everything you're saying is wonderful, and the idea of how things are really shrinking down and you're making more penetration in your own community is important. And you see people coming out in droves to support what they can for small businesses. And I think that throughout the country, small businesses are seeing kind of the same deal. There's a lot of importance placed on the fact that you're hiring neighbors and friends and relatives of people that live in and around where you are.
Yeah. That's it. We've come to appreciate more of what we've got right around us. And I think that's pretty nice.
I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what the COVID restrictions are where you are and how you guys are dealing with those. The taco truck sounds great, and I have questions about that next.
So first off, we do not have the same flexibility as Maryland has to be able to do direct sales outside of our business, as in delivery. We can't do any sort of delivery, whether it's ourselves or through a third party. We can't do any sort of shipping at all. So that's pre-COVID. Delaware is just one of those states that's held out because the sky is going to fall if people can all of a sudden get stuff shipped to them. But when COVID first hit, we were obviously shut down pretty much entirely. Middle of March, it's been just about a year. We were able to reopen after about 2 weeks to be able to do some sales of folks, for people grabbing stuff to go. We weren't really ready for that. We'd done a little bit of sort of planning, but that was mostly people coming in, grabbing a bottle, and then heading out. We had started to roll out some batched cocktails, and we were doing a little bit of that, but we really didn't have the infrastructure in order to truly do that kind of online sales. So between that beginning of April and June timeframe, we were hand sanitizer like everybody else. We were just pumping out as much hand sanitizer. selling it as cheap as we possibly could to get it into the hands of as many first responders as we could possibly do. We mostly service state agencies, fire departments, police departments, and when we could, we did roll some out to the general public, but mostly we were focused on state agencies and first responders. But it gave us some time to build out some of the online infrastructure. So we, created the online ordering system, the fulfillment system, the plans around that. And when we were finally able to reopen, which was the end of June, we opted to, instead of allowing anybody in our building, we could right now service up to 50% capacity as long as you meet social distancing requirements. We're pretty science-minded people. It's a relatively small building. There's no way to stay safe and be breathing the same air in the middle of the summer or in the middle of the winter in a spot like this. So we've opted to not open our indoors to anybody and just do outdoor seating. And so the weather was nice. We reopened as just outdoor seating. And that's how we've kept it for the last. We started that in the end of June. So we're 9 months now of pretty much just being outdoors. People are still sitting outside in the middle of the winter. They're bringing blankets, and we've got all the heaters and stuff that we could piece together. But the big thing for us has been the to-go cocktails. We could always do cocktails to go as long as they were packaged a certain way. Distilleries actually had some loopholes that kind of allowed that to happen. But the flexibility that the state gave to be able to do it and utilize other products, like utilizing liqueurs and things that we don't make, all of that kind of stuff has allowed us to really do and put a lot of neat stuff with the to-go cocktail business. And that's definitely what's been keeping us running. It's a lot more labor intensive. It's a lot of things that we hadn't planned for, specialty labels and new bottles and things like that. So there's certainly an investment of time, talent, and treasure to make it all work. But it's in the end, it's actually been a great asset. And we're looking towards the future here, thinking we'll be reopening hopefully in the summer. But imagining that the to-go business is going to stick around. And it looks like legally the state's going to allow us to keep doing it. So
that's encouraging.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by all of the different ways that distilleries are trying to innovate, and everybody's been using the word pivot. So I'm going to move away from that one, but shift your focus in operations and how you can still deliver your products to the consumer in a way that's meaningful, builds a relationship, and that you can still stand behind what you're doing. You're not cheapening the experience. So those types of investments in new packaging and making sure that it still carries all of the quality standards that you would want a guest to have when they come and try your spirit there or walk away with a bottle of a prepared spirit. It's thoughtful, and I think that that's a great thing to do.
Yeah, 2020 was supposed to be a really big year for us. And so it hit a little bit hard in that some of these big things that we planned. So it was going to be the year that we could begin to roll out our 4-year aged products. And we had plans to launch bottled and bond products in the fall of last year. We were going to be doing a lot of flash and events, and we were planning some big parties and some cool stuff. It was a little bit demoralizing that we didn't get to do a lot of those things. We still did them, right? We still made those products, but there wasn't the big release parties and things like that we had hoped to have for those. However, we've managed to find ways to try and create that engagement in different forms. It's forced us to be innovative. We've changed up some of our packaging, obviously the to-go cocktails, but we've started making a lot more smaller, really small batches, distillery-only releases. We've been doing a number of liqueurs. We're just bottling one of them earlier today. They're things that are, we're not doing a lot of it. We're playing around and experimenting, but it's forcing us to try and do some things that are a little bit new or different, because that way we can stay in that frame of that sort of presence of mind of some of our customers. Breweries have always been putting out, you pump out a new beer once a week or something like that for a lot of breweries, it seems like. It's a little bit tougher for a distillery to, push out that many new products, but I think we've ended up forcing ourselves to be a little bit more innovative and do a little bit more outside of our comfort zone because of not being able to engage our consumers in that sort of traditional way that we normally would.
I'm really excited to see how all of the effort and momentum that this industry has been putting into everything over the last year kind of forces some changes in some other things. I mean, a lot of consumers don't necessarily know all the ins and outs in the dirty business of how distilleries have to interact with federal regulatory authorities and things like that. And there's always been issues where we come up to speed bumps and the whole industry gets slowed down because things don't get processed quickly enough, or there have been issues. And I think that this rapid fire deal of, hey, we need to start making things happen is really going to help kind of move maybe some of the markers a little bit and help people see business move more smoothly in the future.
Yeah. Sorry for the loud noise if you hear it. Apparently there's a cement truck pouring some cement next door.
I live on a busy street in downtown Frederick, Maryland, and I tell you what, all afternoon it's like the super speedway around here. People hit this light that's like half a block from my house, and they just feel like, hey, rev those engines and go, man.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm often muting myself or apologizing for background noise.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a couple of interesting things there that I know we wanted to talk about. This bottled and bond product lineup that you have. Do you want to talk a little bit about those and kind of introduce us to your portfolio that way?
Sure. So as I mentioned, we started off with vodka and gin as our two main products, and actually our Candy Manor gin, this one right here, still, if not our best-selling product, it's still up there in the top. It's a lavender-forward gin, very, very sort of that Western style, and it's been just a great product from the beginning. And I'm a big gin drinker. My wife's a big gin drinker. We love a lot of those classic cocktails, so it's been a great asset. But we had started this business with the goal of ultimately being able to bring out some of those aged products, and it was the whiskeys that got us excited. So when we launched our first yearling bourbon and yearling rye at pretty much about 2 years into operations. We opened during the barrel shortage of 2013 and 2014, where it was really hard for us to get any significant number of new barrels. So we were hoping that the first year we would be able to roll out some yearling whiskeys. Ended up being the second year that we had finally had enough that we were able to put some out. But the goal had always been to continue to move to get to that 4+ year old product. So we were always laying down more than we were able to ultimately sell with that goal. And so 2020 was this great chance because we now had enough aged whiskey that we could start to roll it out. And we in-house here, we really liked the idea of utilizing that bottled and bond designation as something that to the consumer says that this product has met some additional standards. We've had straight whiskeys. Those were, very well received. They worked great. They were really, our backbone for the last couple of years here. So when it came to being able to move into those 4 and 4+ year old products, we made the decision to shift our standard whiskey offerings to the bottled and bond designation in order to try and set them apart a little bit. So this is our Painted Stave bottled and bond bourbon. And then we also have our bottled and bond rye. I'm throwing off your things. Oh, wow, you were quick on that, getting that one up there. The bourbon here, we do a high rye mash bill for it. 26% rye in the mash, 66% is corn. The remaining 8% is malted barley. So it's a high rye mash bill intended to be a spicier style of bourbon. We also use extra heavy char for our barrels. That's why it ends up with a really, really dark color. We wanted to make a bourbon that was just a more aggressive set of flavors. The goal wasn't a soft, sweet, wheated bourbon or something like that. We wanted something that was going to have a little bit of power when you used it in cocktails, knowing that a lot of our bourbon was going to end up being used in old fashions and Manhattans and things like that. So fundamentally, that's kind of how we conceptualize that whiskey. And the 4-year-old bottled in bond is a fantastic example. I mean, we're super pleased with all of our whiskeys, but being able to give it that extra couple of years versus what we've been offering and kick it up a little bit with the 100 proof has just been a really, really nice evolution of that product. So really happy about it. And then the bottle and bond rye. Rye is the sister or the older brother maybe of bourbon. I don't know how you want to look at it. It's not doesn't have the fancy designation, but certainly the older of the style. And knowing that we're here in the Mid-Atlantic, we wanted to make that Maryland style, or we would say a Mid-Atlantic style, since it was what was being made in Delaware 200 years ago. But we wanted to make that style of rye that utilized a little bit more corn in the mash bill. So ours is 70% rye, 25% corn, the remaining 5% malted barley. Gives a little bit more of that a sweetness to it. The rye is always done really, really well, especially at higher proofs. Our cask strength rye, we've done a couple of cask strength releases, but the cask strength rye is just fantastic. We sort of hoard that for ourselves. So finally getting to roll that out for the bottled and bond, being able to do it at that 100 proof, a little bit higher than what we had typically done. Just a really, really nice round-bodied sipping rye whiskey. It's come out really, really fantastically. So very, very happy about both of those. We wish we would have had more fanfare and being able to launch them with a party and releases and stuff. We sort of just quietly snuck them out onto the shelves and did a little bit of blast with our email groups, but the response has been fantastic. So.
Sometimes that little silent, sneaky approach is a good way to do things, especially if you have people who have heard about it and are excited about the potential.
Yeah. And that's, a lot of what we've had to get a lot better at is our marketing, because doing the events and things like that they were a great way to bring in a lot of people and get some attention. But when you're more about just kind of keeping that constant flow of information and back and forth with your consumers without being able to truly see them face to face like we used to. So we've, you had to utilize our email marketing and text message marketing and that kind of stuff a lot more so that our fans know about this stuff and are able to really kind of tap into it first off.
So we talked about bottled and bond a little bit in a previous episode. We did a whiskey roundtable during Maryland Spirits Month. But for anybody who's watching this video, I don't want to send them somewhere else to learn this information. Can you share with maybe the novice whiskey, bourbon, rye fan what bottled and bond means and why that's not only an important designation for the brand that it's on or the bottle it's on, but also for you as a distillery and what it means about your capabilities and your interests?
Yeah. So first off, bottle and bond, the designation starts with the Bottled and Bond Act of 1897. The federal government knew, because there had been a number of problems, but they knew they needed to create some sort of a standard of quality. And large distillers at the time were pushing for this because a lot of adulterated whiskey was on the market, stuff that it had like creosote and like who knows what else put in it to make it look older or taste older. So the Bottled and Bond Act laid out a few specific things that had to be. One, it had to be aged for at least 4 years in a federally bonded warehouse. At the time, those were literally federal warehouses. Now, obviously, all distilleries, well, maybe not all, but the vast majority of distilleries are bonded facilities. It has to be bottled at 100 proof or 50% alcohol. It has to be made by one distillery. So it can't be blended bourbon made from multiple or blended rye made from different distilleries. And it has to be made during one distilling season. So that means there's like the first half of the year and the second half of the year are those designated distilling seasons. So it's not that you can take, some 6-year-old barrels and some 4-year-old barrels and blend them together and create this bottled and bond. It really has to be about the time and place that whiskey was distilled. So it was a very, very significant measure of quality for a very long time. It sort of fell out of favor as in the 80s and 90s, we started seeing a lot of older American whiskeys hit the market because of the glut of production that had happened in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s when bourbon sales were in the toilet. So you start seeing those older products, and Bottled and Bond no longer carries that sort of cachet. But for small producers like us, where being able to put out a standard offering of a 7-year or a 10-year product would require sourcing whiskey. We would have had to have been buying in 4 or 5-year-old product, aging it ourselves, maybe blending it. And that's not something that we were anxious to do. For us, we really looked at Bottled and Bond as a symbol that if we could produce enough whiskey and it was of that quality and met those designations, that was a little bit of a we've arrived type of moment. So, sort of in our heart, it was where we wanted to get to. And so it means a lot to us. And I think for a lot of whiskey consumers, right, you guys have been talking about it. We've been talking about Bottled and Bond with our distributors. We've been talking about Bottled. You've been reading about it in Whiskey Advocate. It's something that more folks, I think, are keying into. And for small producers, those craft producers, I think that Bottled and Bond is a nice designation. It's a milestone point in a distillery's life to be able to produce that kind of a product. And we're happy to be there.
I think we're conversing telepathically because I'm sitting here thinking milestone. This is a milestone for any small distillery to be able to say, hey, we were able to produce this. We produced the quantity, which was a very big part. Yeah. And we had the patience to let this become the product that it is. And it's kind of a feather in the cap. Hey, not only were we able to produce all of this ourselves, we weren't buying in from anywhere else, but we also had the ability to put it all together into something that we're proud of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yes, and while a lot of people would look at these kinds of things maybe as like you said, they lost some of their luster. This label when there was this boon of aged whiskeys and people started jumping on that bandwagon. Oh, I've got 23-year-old, 25-year-old, whatever it is. But now that you have this designation, it means more than just a marketing object. Because it does say something about what your business is capable of. So that's why I wanted you to be able to describe that in a little bit more depth, because I know it does mean a lot.
Sure. Yep.
I think it's also pretty fascinating, that story and that background, the federally bonded warehouse and all that kind of stuff. It's like, some G-man is protecting this bourbon from being doctored or mixed up or messed with.
They're on site and trying to, I don't know what they did all day, but that kind of protecting the whiskey type of thing.
Yeah, I love it. I have visions of guys in trench coats with derby hats on and Thompson machine guns.
Yeah.
Before we get too far into the next lineup of products that you wanted to talk about, I did want to ask about the Candy Manor gin. Where does that name come from?
So Candy Manor is sort of a fun thing. It was so dating back to probably the late 1800s, as far as we can tell. There was a candy store here in Smyrna. The candy store was rumored to have a number of adult offerings, in addition to the standard confectionery offerings. So we thought that was a lot of fun. It was a story that we heard when we were kicking the tires about locating here in Smyrna, and thought it was a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, and we kind of enjoyed that. So we decided to work it in to our product. It's a debated topic. There are folks who absolutely say that this was 100%. It was you ordered the right chocolate downstairs. You got a key to go upstairs to the matrons of the house. Or there are people who absolutely say that this is totally made up and it wasn't true. So, which is even better, right? Like, you don't want everybody to agree that this was a thing. There's no fun in that.
Yeah. Where's the lore?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's just like, it just was like, we want a little debate for it. So we had a lot of fun. The idea on that was to a little nod, and we actually we did this in a lot of our products to begin with. We gave a little bit of a nod to our town and to our location. We started off with our vodka is still silver screen vodka, right? We're an old movie theater, so silver screen, and we actually, all of our vodkas and like flavored vodkas and stuff that we did up front, everything tied into movies in some way. We had a lot of fun doing that because it was kind of interesting. I would say, though, we're actually moving a little bit away from that as a label. So we started off, as some distilleries do this, you sort of make a choice in how you want to brand yourself. You're either a branded family or a family of brands. And if folks don't know that, so a branded family would be, we are Painted Stave Gin, Painted Stave Bourbon, Painted Stave Vodka. Painted Stave is our name there. Or a family of brands would be each product sort of has its own name. And that's where we started. We started Silver Screen Vodka, Candy Manor Gin, Diamond State Bourbon, Off the Hoof Scrapple Vodka. Each product had its own name. And we really like that. However, it's challenging because communicating what we can communicate really easily here in-house is very difficult to communicate through liquor store owners and bartenders and distribution salespeople. And so we found that we created a lot of confusion around our products. So people come in and they, hey, I want that Painted Stave Gin, and they don't know what it is, right? Because they don't know that it's Candy Manor. And so we're actually making a shift strategically. This is part of our 2020 plan that got delayed a little bit. But we're making a shift to becoming more of that branded family versus the family of brands. So that Candy Manor Gin pretty soon is going to be same juice in the bottle, but it's going to be replaced with what we're calling our Painted Stave Botanical Dry Gin, and we're moving everything to you'd see us on our whiskey labels where it's Painted Stave, bottled in bond bourbon versus we had been bottling everything under Diamond State. So a strategic choice that we made. So we kind of lose the fun story a little bit, but in the end, the hope is that that's part of our evolution as a business, to being able to better market our products when we're not the people that are doing the vast majority of the marketing for it.
Well, you always have a wonderful opportunity to have merchandise that harkens back to the vintage names, and it just tells the story of how the brand has matured, which I think is probably the more important thing for your business in the long run.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of what it is. We didn't start with a fully baked business, right? And a lot of small distilleries don't. You didn't walk in here with millions of dollars that you could spend on all the marketing and the fancy stuff, and like everything is perfect day one. That's nice, but the vast majority of the small distilleries, we're evolving, and I think customers like that. I think that it's neat to be able to see a business and the products evolve, especially when people can really be closely interacting with them, right? We have people who are here for all of our events, like they're family at this point. And they love to be part of that story and be engaged in that. We used to do the great bottling parties and all that kind of stuff. These engagement points, we want to get back to more of that, because that buy-in and that support from our community is just fantastic. Right?
Yeah, and that sense of ownership that your neighbors and your guests bring when they feel like they're tied to your business somehow is really powerful.
Yeah, and we sit there and one of the greatest honors that I think we get is when we're sitting at the bar or we're out someplace else and you hear somebody talking about your products, but it's a customer telling another customer, right? Like having somebody else carry that water for you to tell your story for you is really cool. And we've loved it from day one, and trying to find more ways to make that easy for people to do too.
It's a hard thing to achieve, so I'm glad that you're able to experience that. It's a very, very good feeling to hear that and see somebody really be willing to preach about what you're doing. It's great.
Yeah.
So we talked about the 2 bottled and bond whiskeys. You had a couple of other whiskeys that you were interested in talking to me about, and I think one of them is extremely timely. So why don't we talk about the other ones on your lineup today?
Yep. So one of these ones, and it's timely because it's our sort of Irish style whiskey. So this is our Diamond State Pot Still whiskey. We cannot make Irish whiskey in the United States, as everybody knows. Irish whiskey can only be made in Ireland. We do try and make this look as Irish as possible. And being that we're coming up on St. Patrick's Day, We're going to be making a lot of cocktails with this Irish whiskey in the next couple of weeks. So this started off actually, I had found some rabbit hole on the internet. Always liked Irish whiskey. Irish whiskey was, to me, this great introduction to whiskey. A lot of friends who wanted to be whiskey drinkers, but weren't just, maybe somebody had poured them like a good scotch or a good bourbon, and it was just way too much for them. So we wanted to create a whiskey that was lighter, that was going to be more approachable for people who were just getting into whiskey. And ultimately, then we can bring them on the whiskey story and have them, start drinking neat rye by the time that they're done with us. So I came across some old recipes for pot still style whiskeys. Most folks might know this if you're into whiskeys, but if you're not, a pot still whiskey generally had a couple of specific attributes. It was made from mostly unmalted barley. That was key because malted barley was being taxed by the English, and the Irish, instead of using all malt like their Scotch brethren were doing for producing a lot of their whiskeys, they were getting taxed heavily on the malt. So they said, well, screw it, we'll just use less malt. So it started being mostly unmalted barley as the main ingredient. It does have some malted barley in it. It does have some rye in it as well, about 10% rye, and then some smoked malts, because a lot of the malts at the time would have actually been dried over wood fires. So this goes back to like a 1600s style whiskey recipe. Sorry, I got somebody who's knocking on the door and I can't go get the door for them. Hold on, can I just mute for a second? Let me just yell at somebody real quick.
Please.
Sorry about that.
No, this is the best part about doing stuff live, man.
Yeah. Somebody's coming to the door and I'm not able. There was somebody at the door? I don't know. She walked away. So then we distill this, and then we age it for at least 2 years. Actually, the bottlings that we've got now are about 3 years. And we aging it in our used rye whiskey barrels. So there's a little bit of rye in the recipe. We're aging it in those used rye whiskey barrels. But it's sort of our lighter sipping whiskey. It makes some really nice things like hot toddies. Does really well in a number of cocktails where you don't really want a heavy, aggressive style whiskey like a bourbon or a rye. And obviously, we're going to drink plenty of it in our cocktails over the next couple of weeks for everything St. Patrick's Day that we'll do.
That's really nice. I think that there are so many enthusiasts with whiskey in this industry that the idea of the really nice, smooth Irish style or approach to whiskey production often gets overlooked because a lot of people are much more interested in big, complex experiences rather than something that's a little bit more intelligent, maybe.
There's a spot for all of it, right? As we've engaged with consumers, we have a lot of people who come through it and they want vodka, right? They start off by wanting like vodka or sweet cocktails and things. Every single one of those people who sort of says, I don't like gin, right? That's a challenge, right? You're just like, well, we're going to fix that. And
I got one for you.
Yeah. And maybe you're not going to like it right now and you're not going to like it just like this, but let's go on a journey together where I can take you from, I only drink, sweet vodka drinks to all of a sudden my favorite drink is, a barrel-aged old-fashioned or all this, I find myself really loving these Campari drinks. And like watching that evolution for a consumer is a lot of fun because then you get to bring it back up to them like, well, I remember when you didn't. Yeah. So having that lighter whiskey was a great entry point for those consumers who want to drink whiskey, who are interested in it, but aren't, they haven't had a great experience. The first thing the whiskey they think about is doing shots of Jack Daniels or something like that when they were in college, right? And they didn't like it because they weren't drinking it well. So let's have something that makes that a little bit more approachable. That's a lot of fun.
I have personally found that in my household. I love big, complex bourbons. I really enjoy deeper more rounded, rich flavors for my palate. And my wife, on the other hand, is not a whiskey fan.
Yep.
So I have found that some of the smoother Irish styles tend to be a little bit more approachable.
Yeah. I knew that this was all working on my wife when we did a trip to Ireland, and she went back and bought 2 more bottles of one of the whiskeys that she liked when we were in Ireland. And I was just like, okay, like,
Nice.
here we go. Like, now we've entered this a new realm here. So
That's fun.
yeah, a lot of fun.
And I think the last one you had on there was the Double Troubled. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Let me grab this one. So I've got a taster bottle, so it's not quite full for us. This is one, and folks, if you've been to any of the events and stuff that we've done with the Maryland Distillers Guild, we've brought this one with us a lot of times when we can. It's one of these collaboration projects. We work with Portman Dominion Brewing Company. It's one of the local breweries here in Delaware. They make their most popular beer. It's called Double D. It's a double IPA, a lot of dry hopping, big, robust, malty, hoppy beer. A lot of drinking one night at a festival and saying, hey, why don't we, I think I probably said, well, whiskey's just what beer wants to be when it grows up or something like that. And the brewer was just like, well, cool, let's try it out. So they brought over a tote, 270 gallons of this Double D. We put it in the still and got this really cool malty, hoppy spirit. Not a lot of bittering hops come through distillation, mostly the aroma hops. So we aged it for a couple of years in our heavily charred casks, and you end up with this really cool malty, hoppy whiskey. Basically, if you like those big double IPAs, this thing drinks like a 47% alcohol IPA. We roll it out. We usually do one release of it a year, 1 or 2 barrels, depending on what we've got in store. But it's a lot of fun, and it's usually a fan favorite when we bring it to festivals and things like that for tasting. So people generally enjoy it. And we've done a lot of these collaborations. A lot of other distilleries have this as well, where they kind of become the recycling center for leftover kegs of beer. We did one a little while ago. It was 4,000 bottles of an orange juice IPA that the brewery shifted from bottles to cans for their production, and the distributor basically just had all the bottles sitting there. Nobody wanted the bottles when they could get the cans, and eventually those all turned into a really cool orange forward gin.
Very cool.
Yeah, so we try and do a lot of that sort of weird, fun stuff when we have the opportunity to.
So did you hand open all of those bottles?
So with a little bit of help, it wasn't our first effort in this. We had done another beer a few years ago, but building a couple of jigs and a couple of lines of people, and you can dump 4,000 bottles of beer into a tank in about 45 minutes.
I saw a post on one of the brewery subreddits that I was following of a guy who made an automated machine using a DeWalt circular wireless saw and a pipe, and was able to drop cans through it for destroying bad product, essentially, and having to prove to the TTB that he did it. He just filmed himself dropping cans through this thing, and it was just buzzsaw, spilled it on the floor, and it was done.
Yeah, that's in talking with one of the breweries that has had this before for products. They're like, I think they said they hired in temps to come in for the day and just dump beers down the drain. So we're happy to not let breweries have to do that. We can give the second life to some bad beer.
Yeah, it's always a nice
beer, just beer that didn't end up where we wanted it to.
Yeah, or beer that it's not what it was going to be in the instance that you wanted it to be there, and that's what you end up with. Yep. It is nice that there is an opportunity for it, especially if it's something that you can be creative and come out with something that's going to have a unique aromatic impact or something like that.
Yeah, and then do a collaboration as sort of an opportunity to partner with another local business. All of those collaboration points, wherever they be, sharing barrels, sharing products, a little bit of cross marketing, all of that stuff is a lot of fun. It keeps us engaged and having a good time. If we were just making the same product all day, every day, I think that's not what a lot of us got in this business to do.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a lot of fun chatting. Before I let you go, I have to ask 2 questions. First one, what taco are you pairing with your favorite spirit? And then I want the best taco and cocktail pairing you have.
Oh, okay. So, boy, that's tough. I am a taco fan, to be honest. I've consumed a lot of them, even prior to having our own taco truck. So, we've been doing as a special this birra taco. I don't know if you've seen or heard these. Apparently, they're Instagram famous tacos.
It's the craze.
Yeah, and they're really, really good with the au jus to dip it in. It's really a lot of fun. But it's a greasy sort of like cheesy taco. I was having one of those the other day and drinking one of these sort of like a highball type of cocktail, and it worked really well because the bright citrus flavors from the cocktail were cutting through some of the cheese and the fat. So it was a good combination. I wouldn't say it was the perfect pairing, but it was certainly working very nicely. If you were to your average evening going into the office while I'm eating my dinner, chances are sipping on like an old fashioned, and I'm just having some chicken or steak or carnitas tacos. I like them street style. I don't put anything weird on them. Cilantro
and onion and call it a day.
Yep, that's all I'm there for.
My man, that's what I'm talking about. Well, you've satisfied my my curiosity in terms of taco and spirits pairings.
Yeah. We're going to be doing a taco a pairing dinner here in the spring as soon as the weather gets nice. Working on the menu for that right now. I'm very excited. This is pretty much, my wife laughs. She's just like, you're living your best life. You have all of the booze and tacos you can eat. Like, I've arrived.
Don't even need to come home and see the family or anything like that.
Yeah. They can come here. We're not far.
Yeah. You guys can find a place to sleep.
Yeah, we got couches.
All right. Well, enjoy that party. Have a lot of fun with the taco and spirits thing. Please make sure that I am added to your email list so I know when that's happening, because I may need to make the drive.
Yeah, absolutely. Come join us.
All right. Well, Mike, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. How can people follow what you guys are doing at Painted Stave?
PaintedStave.com for our website. You can sign up on our newsletter there. That's going to get you lots of information. Painted Stave on Instagram and Facebook. That's our major stuff. End up on the newsletter. That's where you're going to find all of the cool deals and fun events and get the first notice for all that kind of stuff. So that's the best spot.
Awesome. And check out MarylandSpirits.org for everything that the Maryland Distillers Guild has been up to. Also, check us out on Instagram and Facebook. We also have a newsletter, so if you want to catch up with what's going on, tune in there. Thank you all very much for tuning in this afternoon, and please do your best to support a Maryland Distillers Guild member this weekend coming up, and enjoy yourselves and stay safe, and we'll see you next week. Mike, have a great one.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Take care.